Alright folks, so this is the final video on helping you with the project, and this basically outlines how you would validate your controller once you design it, and then how you would go about implementing with your final system, and then what to do after that to prepare your project report. Okay, so if you have completed all the previous videos, you should have your KP and KI gains that you need for your controller. So you can use the KP and KI transfer function, the transfer function that we came up with, and implement that in the form of a PI controller that you implement in Simulink. Now, do not use the built-in PID function, because if you do that, there are additional features that you have to set, but rather implement the PI controller transfer function that we discussed in class. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then remember to have your feedback, okay, with your sensor gain, appropriate sensor gain in the system, so that you get the desired response. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then the next element is your input. So to the system input, use something reasonable, because you are setting a speed reference 100 or 500 or 1000, even though it's going to work at any value. Okay, and then once you set that up, so for now I'm gonna just disconnect one of these. Once you set that up, when you run your simulation for the selected runtime based on what you want, you should see the desired response pop up. Okay, so you should see that appear. Now, once you get that response with the transfer function, so keep in mind, this is the transfer function that you use for your controller design. So make sure to test your PI controller with the transfer function you used, and verify if the % overshoot and settling times are what you expect them to be per the design. That's your step one. Once that's validated, now you can move on to the complete block diagram, which has the load transient in it, and validate if your controller meets the specifications. Okay, and if you have validated your top block diagram, the transfer function, you should be able to compare that and then compare the response with that, with your controller, with the closed loop implemented for the same input. Okay, for the same input, you should be able to run the simulation and validate if it's meeting the desired requirement. Right, so that should be a controller validation. And then after that, you can change load, you can add a load and see what the system does under that load condition. Okay, do you see any change? Do you see any variation? Is the speed being regulated at the desired value despite the load variation? Okay, so that's something you can actually validate. Initial step time, final value, so let's change this to 1, and essentially you should see the system performing as expected. There is a transient, somewhat of a transient, it's not clear because of the dashed line, but you should be able to see that. And then if you look at the motor current and motor torque, they should also align with that. Okay, so these are things that you have to discuss in your report, as I have provided those guidelines for you. So once you validated here, now you can actually start writing your report. And there are a couple of points I want to address when you write your report. Do not snip your figures. Do not use the snipping tool when you are copying and pasting figures in your report. Okay, there are proper ways to use Matlab. Now, first thing you will need to do is to look at the scopes and change the background, and you do that with style. Okay, in your style, you can change these background colors, you can change the line colors, you can change the line styles the way you want so that they are proper for a report. Okay, so that's your first step. And then you can actually copy these, you can export these to a figure file, and then once you export them to a figure file, now you can basically copy your figure over and then paste it. Okay, so if you go print to figure, now you have a figure of the scope capture from Simulink, and then you can go I think it's edit, copy figure. Okay, now let's say before you do that, let's say your font sizes are too small, right, and you want to have proper axis labels, right? Then you're going to go edit in the property inspector. Now you can edit these figure properties. For example, let's say you want to add, there you go. Okay, so let's say you want to change the font size, right? So you can say 14. Okay, so now you have a larger font size so that it's visible. Okay, let's say you wanted to add a legend. If you had multiple graphs, you can add a legend like that. Okay, so likewise you can actually edit, make changes to the figure before you copy it over. You can also resize it if you want, likewise. Okay, and then you can go to edit. Oh, and then one more thing, I want to show you the labels. There we go. So if you click on axes and then go to this figure labels, figure 1, then we have to find the proper labels. There we go. X label. So we can call this time. Seconds. Okay. Let's find that part again. Oops. There. Right. So time. Seconds. Okay, so you have the X label, and now we have to find the Y label. Okay, so we're going to go down. What is it? Axes, Y label, text. Let's call this current amps. Okay, so now you have your figures here, your property showing your labels, and now what you can do is you can go to edit, copy figure, right? So once you have your figure copied, you can paste it, and you can paste it directly into Word, the template I have provided, and it's gonna fit nicely and it's gonna be clear to the reader. Okay, so this is the practice you're going to have to follow. Do not snip anything. Do not have any black background figures on your scope. Make sure everything is properly changed. And then in your report, right, you're going to be using this template that I have posted. Do not have any handwritten material on it. Okay, for equations, you can use equation editor. All right. Now I'll show you how to find that. So for example, there is an example up here, but let's say I want to add an equation. Okay, so I would go here, click insert, equation, right? That's your equation editor. So let's say y equals x squared plus 5. Okay, x squared plus 5, and then you can tab at the equation number, tab from the left, likewise. Okay, so now you have your equation. So this is how you set up an equation in your report. All right, so you can't have any handwritten content in a formal report. All right, so I think this wraps everything up that you need to know for your project. Hopefully you will be able to get this done. We have a couple of weeks to go. Feel free to let me know if you have any questions. Thank you.